You know, I commented on the fact that Shinobi 1 didn't really have an intro cutscene, but given the quality of that, maybe it's a good thing. Hello everyone and welcome to Let's Play Shadow Dancer! By and large, the second Shinobi game, technically there's like 2 or 3 different second Shinobi games. Getting right in, things are similar to what they were in the first game, but also a little bit different. Gone is the life bar, we're now closer to the arcade-accurate, 1 hit per life thing. You only have, I think, 3 lives by default, so make sure you dodge anything on screens, including jumping over fire. Your techniques are still largely the same, however, to use your ninjutsu this time around, you have to hold up and press the attack button. And the dog in that intro cutscene isn't just there for a cutscene. You might notice, as I hold the attack button in the bottom right, the fire slowly starts to become a dog. You can use that to attack 3 enemies per stage, in the case they're in an awkward spot. With that said, I don't really use it. There aren't hostages to rescue in this game. Instead, certain enemies per stage will drop bombs. If you collect every bomb in a stage, you get a power-up before the boss fight to do 2 health points of damage versus 1. With that said, like Shinobi 1, where they, in the Master System version at least, made it so that hostages were optional, the bombs are also completely optional to grab. Otherwise, you can still jump between layers in each stage by pressing up and jump or down and jump, respectively. By and large, I would say this is the harder game between this and Shinobi 1, partially just due to the one-hit kill scenario of everything. But I will say, it's definitely the shorter game. Not only is this one-off video only about 16.5 minutes versus Shinobi 1's, what was it, 26? This game's also only 4 stages versus the original game's 5. Similarly to Shinobi 1, though, every stage is broken up into multiple portions, but compared to Shinobi 1, it's usually only 2, and the second one is usually the boss fight. With that said, first boss fight is this giant samurai. He throws glowing balls. Some of them bounce low and you have to jump over them. Others bounce high, you need to duck under them. Hit him in the head, and he eventually dies. And then you're done. We also got bonus stages back from the original game, and the first variety we see is more or less this game's version of the bonus stage from Shinobi 1. You're throwing shurikens up a building, and you need to hit every single shinobi you can. You get points for every single one you hit, but you get an extra life if you hit them all. I have never successfully cleared this particular bonus round variety, though I do get pretty close more often than not. My general strategy is to stay relatively close to the center, because more often than not, especially early on in the bonus rounds, the ninjas try to go across the building to jump down to the next story, and with the distance they walk, usually being around the center is usually enough. Now, because this is a shorter part, I should probably go right into what the manual has to say for this game's storyline, because somehow the lack of story in Shinobi 1 was more clear than that dog barking at us in the first 15 seconds. Now, let's see whatever the manual has to say for this game's lack of story, because it's gotta be probably better than what Shinobi 1 had, honestly. Space sabotage. In the mid-1990s, the space program was moving ahead full steam. Space shuttles were launched nearly every day, carrying various cargo, crew, and science officers who performed experiments. Secretly, the government tasked the crew of the space shuttle Olympia with the crucial mission of testing a new weapon system by remote control. A terrorist group known as the Asian Dawn, renowned for its rampant use of violence, was told the secret mission by a mole they had managed to plant in the NSP, National Space Program. I'd like to note that is quote mark National Space Program in parentheses, laboratories, and planned to sabotage the mission, hijack the shuttle, and use their control over the weapon system to threaten the Earth. It's Takashi to the rescue. The world-famous ninja do-gooder has looked for a chance to take out Asian Dawn. Now you can help him shut them down while ensuring the security of an entire nation. Head into battle with your throwing stars, your ninja saber, and your trusty dog, and defeat the terrorists wherever you find them. Don't let them get inside the shuttle. Okay, I'm wrong. Shinobi 1 somehow had a better plot synopsis. Wow, that's bad. Now, control-wise, Shadow Dancer is also notably inferior to Shinobi 1, in that whereas in Shinobi 1 you weren't dedicated to your jumps, you could control your jumps super well, reverse in the case you were thinking you weren't going to make something. Shadow Dancer is closer to Castlevania 1 in that you're dedicated to your jump arc once you start the jump. With that said, this game, outside of jumping over some fire at certain points and climbing things, doesn't have much active platforming hazards. It's usually there just to help you avoid attacks more than anything, honestly. So, while I don't like the jumping arc, at least it doesn't make or break the game, barring level 3 now that I think about it. Either way, boss at level 2 is a train. We need to hit that glowing light that's just consistently scrolling up and down the main body, while the cannon shoots at us, and the train slowly gets closer. Thankfully, hitting the light does knock back the train, but more often than not, because it speeds up the lower its HP gets, you get to the point where it's just locked you into the pure left side of the screen, and timing hitting this thing at this point without dying is a trial, honestly. I'd argue that is probably the hardest part of the game right there. Because it's harder than Shinobi 1, but Shinobi 1 wasn't a very hard game to begin with, honestly, so this just becomes a very odd game because of that. Either way, time for the second bonus stage variety. We are going to be jumping off a building. Or rather, have jumped off a building. And we're going to be falling down, and ninjas are going to come down from below, and we need to take them out. You get points and extra lives to take care of all of them. Honestly, this is an easier bonus stage variety, partially because the ninjas are so slow that even if you stay in the center, you're more likely to hit them all as long as you hit that button 1 at a good rhythm. Whereas in the Genesis Shadow Dancer game, which is technically a remake of this, they made this damn near impossible to get all the ninjas in because they're so fast and they spawn more than one at once. More on that. What is that, 2 games away now? 3 games? Something like that. Now, something I should note, in the case you don't want to play the game, I don't blame you, this game does actually have a stage select. So does Shinobi 1, which I didn't mention then, but I feel this is the more prevalent game to mention it in, given how less interesting it is despite its advancements, because graphically speaking, like, the spray work in this game is great for Master System. To use the title screen, you need to hold one button on controller 2, you need to hold buttons on the second controller, and then press start on the title screen. For instance, if you want to go straight to the boss at level 1, you have to hold up in the 1 button on controller 2. Level 2 is right in 2. Level 2's boss is right in 1. Level 3's boss is down in 2. Level 3, rather, is down in 2. Level 3's boss is down in 1. Level 4 is left in 2. Level 4's boss, the final boss, is left and 1. Alright, welcome to the most platforming heavy stage in the game. With that said, honestly, the jumps are seldom ever a threat, as they usually place platforms on a higher or lower layer in such a way that you can just walk over them. There is one really weird enemy in this stage, though, if you're going for the power-up by killing every enemy. The Alligators. The Alligators are weird in that you can still hit their hitbox from like 2.5 miles above them while jumping over their own tail whip attack. And it's awkward, but it's the only way you can get, I think, like, if it's not the last bomb, it's the second to last bomb. And you'll always know whether or not you got the last bomb or not because the pickup text isn't a point total. It's the fact that it says power up. Oh, hey, look, the rare enemy that has more than 1 HP. Oh, I also probably should have mentioned this sooner now that I think about it. But by and large, you might notice this game looks like it's running a little bit weirdly because it's running at roughly 50 frames a second. That's because this game wasn't released stateside. This port of the arcade game, more or less, was only released in Europe and Brazil. And I think the various home PC ports were only also released in Europe. Like, I think there was one on the ZX Spectrum, which, oh my god, I'm looking at, oh my god, it was published by US Gold, the same people that published Mega Man Game Gear. Oh god. Alright, Phase 3, or Boss 3 rather, pulls levers and slowly gets closer to you with a wall that you can occasionally shoot through. I don't think it's wearing pants. I don't think they were wearing pants whatsoever. Okay. Honestly, that's probably the easiest boss in the game because you can just mash the button and you'll kill it eventually. Alright, with that though, we're on to our final bonus stage for the game because we're already moving on to the final level. This game is probably one of the more accurate in terms of, like, length arcade ports I can think of, because usually the home console parts of arcade games either shortened the game, changed the game entirely, or added more stages. I think Shadow Dancer Arcade... Oh, no, actually, it's a little bit shorter. Shadow Dancer Arcade. Whoa, that's loud. Looks like it has a few more stage sections per stage, and maybe even an extra stage period. I'm not surprised, given that this is the Master System. Honestly, the sprites alone were probably so big they took up most of the cartridge. This is a very odd game by the Shinobi series standards, though, because while there are other Shinobi games we're even going to be seeing that have, like, a one-shot kill thing, by and large, the console ports kept to the life bar that we saw in Shinobi 1. And it makes me wonder if that's one of the reasons they never released it stateside, outside the fact Shadow Dancer as an arcade game may not have just done as well stateside if it was released stateside, period. I'm actually not sure about that. It probably was. I wasn't into the arcades because I was born after most of them closed, to be frank. My arcade experience growing up was Chuck E. Cheese, the occasional boardwalk one I would see in various vacation areas, and that's about it. In fact, most of my experience playing actual arcade games is like the downloadable versions of various ones on like the PlayStation Network or Xbox Live Arcade, should the case be, rarely over the years. Like, that's how I played TMNT Arcade, at least TMNT 4. It's how I played X-Men arcade game, Simpsons arcade game, things like that, really. Honestly, by the way, the third stage is probably the hardest in terms of actual content because there's platforming you might have to do. Whereas the second boss is overall still going to be the hardest by and large just because of the limited time span you have to walk. Oh god, the bit crunching. Oh, that kind of hurt my ears. If that was loud for me, if the audio turned down, god, I wonder what that sounds like in the final video. Either way, we're already on to the final boss, which is the only two-phase boss as well. Phase 1's a little bit weird because the boss themselves doesn't actively move. They summon a shield in front of themselves and throw tiny mini ninjas at you. Shoot down the ninjas to reduce the health bar, and then you'll eventually move on to Phase 2. They do try to track onto you, sort of, but my general advice is jump over the low ones, duck under the super high ones, and then try to take anything else you can out along the way. Phase 2, they walk towards you, and they will either attack high or low, depending on whether or not you are ducking in front of them or just standing in front of them. Bait out an attack, duck under the high attack, and then they die eventually. And that's game. Woo, that was underwhelming. You know, I'll give this game credit. It at least has, you know, an ending compared to Shinobi 1's game over screen. But that's Shadow Dancer for the Master System, notably different than the Genesis game we'll be getting to later on in this little marathon. I don't want to say it's alright, because honestly it's not. The controls just are lesser than any other game in the series. Graphically, it's super impressive for the Master System, but I think that came at a cost of fun in any regard. It's not non-functional, it's just uninteresting is probably the best way to put it. Also, I'm actually editing this in a little bit differently. But what we're seeing here is the closest thing to an extended credit sequence. This is the demo that plays if you let the title screen hold for a little bit. It's the track sequence from the demo in the arcade game. But I'm only showing this off because there's actually something a little bit different about it. They give little splash screens about the main character and each of the enemy sprites throughout the game. This only goes on for about 2 minutes, but since the game is only 14 minutes long anyway, I figured, you know what, why not? Let's at least show this off. Honestly, I don't want to say this is the worst Shinobi game, there's one that is decisively worse than this, but if you're looking to get into the series in any regards, I'd say this and one of the particular other games we'll be getting into later on in this marathon, because we're going in terms of chronological release, are the ones you should avoid. I'd say go right from Shinobi 1 into Revenge of the Shinobi on Genesis, and then just stick with the Genesis and Game Gear from then on. Don't touch the Master System at all. It's just not going to be worth it. It was cool for the time, the Master System, because we played a few games on it over the years, but it was limited, I guess is the best way to put it. Also, I think some of these enemies aren't in the Master System version, period, outside of this intro sequence, now that I think about it. Oh yeah, I didn't even get to mention, there's more than 2 types of magic in the game. I talked about the dog one, and I showed off whichever one of the Tatsumaki or Batsuso one that was. I think which one you use might be dependent on the amount of lives you have, according to the manual. Honestly, it's not worth using the magic in this game, period. The most it can do for you is some invincibility frames. Because by and large, you can take anything out super quickly with the shuriken anyway, so what's the point? But yeah, that's Shadow Dancer. Next up, we're moving on to what I would consider the first Shinobi that's worth playing, if I'm recalling the order. And yeah, thank you all for watching. Have a great night. Take care, and I'll see you guys next Let's Play, whatever that may be. See you guys then.